Yeah, I'm Doug Simpson with McAfee, security engineer. Going to talk today about security, of course. I'm going to just go over these real quickly, and then we're going to go, and each slide after this, we're going to go into some more detail about this, okay? So, always be vigilant, pretty straightforward about that. Patch, and we're talking about your operating system and your applications. Do not run as administrator. Run AV, of course, keep that up to date. Do not turn off your AV protection, or don't allow it to be turned off. Down here, we're going to talk about configuration, so there's going to be a little bit more about that here. We're going to talk about how your AV should be configured, defaults and non-defaults. AV is not enough, of course, and I'll explain that in just a bit. Do not click on links and emails. That one, I think you can take back to your home. I hope you will. As well as don't go down dark alleys. Our title of this is, of course, protecting the asset. And I kind of want to define the asset before we get in it, because it can be thrown around and it can be quite generic. So, and in this day and age, we also do have virtual assets as well as physical assets. I'm looking out and I see some smartphones and some laptops and some iPods and stuff like that sitting out. That would be, of course, in my mind, an asset. Anything that's going to be connecting to your network that you have to be concerned with, right? At the same time, not just, maybe you might not be managing that asset, but also that asset may be affecting your network. I know here at CNA, as well as a lot of other corporations, they're concerned about those unmanaged assets that they don't know about, right? And they might not be malicious assets. So, for instance, we're a stone's throw away from DePaul right now, and there's a lot of students sitting in there trying to find wireless. And I'm pretty certain that CNA has a wireless connectivity here. Hey, if I can get on CNA's wireless while I'm a student and I can get out to the internet, I don't care, right? If you have a wireless sitting out there on your network and an asset can get onto it, how does that affect your other assets, right? How do those unmanaged assets affect you at all? So workstation, laptop, server, mobile device, like I said, physical and virtual. And I also wanted to make sure that we understood across different operating systems. This one I can't stress enough. So this is going to be the first one for our 10 commandments, or our commandments, I should say. And it's really funny because for the amount of security I could give your network, and I could put into your network, I could do to secure your endpoints, your assets, whatever, there's still one thing that is going to be the weakest link. And unfortunately, it's going to be us. It's the human person. Yeah. And I don't mean that just across the user, that you may have, which I think education is huge for your users. And I'll explain that in a second. But also me. I can misconfigure something. There was I think it was 2010, August of 2010, if you were a BlackBerry user, the network went down for about a week. Right. That was a misconfiguration of one person. The person still works at BlackBerry. The person was looking at two screens. One was production, one was non-production. He thought he had pushed out a test code to his test in production. He pushed it out to production instead of non-production. Brought down the network for a week. Even trained, even well-meaning IT professionals can bring down networks. Okay, so it's not just the user themselves. At the same time, we need to educate the user. We need to make sure they understand. For instance, we have at McAfee, and you get this for free. It's called Site Advisor, and you can put it into your browser, right? I think other companies have them as well. And in a sense, what it does is tells you green, red, or yellow for a certain host that you're going to go to. So if it's serving up malicious content, if I go on there and I'm going to get infected by something, or if it's going to try to infect me, we'll tell you that it's red, for instance, right? If you purchase it and put it onto your on your laptops, desktops, whatever, at home or at your organization, it won't block unless if you're managing it and tell it to block, right? So we can just tell people, hey, this is a green site, this is a red site, and so that. So if I go Google, for instance, I go Google McAfee, and it'll show little green dots next to it or red dots whether or not that website is clean or not clean, right? I can't speak enough about being suspicious. I mean, if you got an email from UPS and you're not expecting a package, why are you clicking on the link?
Right.
Does anybody remember LoveBug? That was the virus that came out back in the early or late 90s. The number one thing that got people to click on it was a title in the email that said, "I love you," right? Who doesn't want to be loved? So I'm clicking on it, right? I was in IT and I got a call from my CEO and he's going, "Why can't I click on this link? I'm clicking on it and nothing's happening." And I'm like, well, because luckily we protected our network from that. So I guess even all the way up to the CEO, they want to be loved. Education, I kind of already pointed that out, and I'll add in the lead your users to water, using Site Advisor, using other things. It's very, very difficult to educate your users. It really is. We had an outbreak at a corporation literally a week after they had just educated them on spam, and it came in through a link in an email. So if you can figure out the correct way of kind of educating people, and probably the best way to do it in my mind, and some of the corporations I work with do it this way, is here are ideas how to protect your home network. Not how to protect our network here at the corporation or our network here at the or at the .org, but how to protect your home network. The idea is that you're going to take that home. Here's Site Advisor. Take that home. So when I implement it here, you're like, hey, great idea. I love this. I use this at home all the time, and everyone will start to use it then, right? This one I can't stress enough. And what usually happens when people do it, they usually patch the operating system, okay? And they forget to patch the other things like Adobe, the Windows Office, or any other application they may have running out there, right? I would recommend highly, if you're running something at home, you should be receiving emails from whoever you're running. If you're running Mac, you can sign up for Mac. They'll tell you, I think they come out about once a month, kind of like Microsoft. And they've gotten better. Mac does have issues. So if you do have a Mac, make sure that you're patching that as well. If you're running Linux or Unix, the same thing goes for that as well. So if you're seeing a little thing that pops up and says, your Adobe Acrobat needs to be patched or it needs to be updated or something like that, I would really look into that and think about updating that and do it across the board for all of your users. That's going to kill you.
Patches, but
yeah, maybe I'm
something else.
updates.
But I wanted to make sure.
Yep. And you're correct. There's also Microsoft will also then, after, like right now we're running on Windows 7, right? So it came out in 2007 or a little bit after that, and Windows 7 would probably has at least 1 or 2 service packs. The service pack itself will be a conglomerate of patches that they roll together for you. New versions are there for a reason. We are about to release what we call an engine for our virus protection. I think we're at engine 5400, and that's going to be 5500, right? And it's the engine, in a sense, drives everything, right? The DATs then plug into that. There's a lot of fixes, there's a lot of security that's going to be put into that new engine, right? It's not just going to be improvements of speed or quality of the product. It's literally going to make the product better. In my mind, what security is assessing your risk, right? So for instance, a patch comes out or an update comes out, and maybe it doesn't affect you. For instance, there was a very important vulnerability last month, MS-12-020, which was a vulnerability in what they call remote desktop, right? Well, if you aren't running remote desktop on any of your computers, if you don't have that port open, you don't really have to put that patch out there, right? And now, if you do have it remote desktop running on any of your computers, geez, I'd be concerned about that. So along the lines of what you're suggesting, there are ways to then customize the downloading of those updates or those patches, and then on your schedule you could do it. I I think that from, for instance, a home user perspective, if I'm talking just about home users, I would probably do it more of an automated fashion. But you're right, from an organization or corporation's perspective, if you have the time to do that, then I would probably assess the patches. It once again goes back to the one right before this, be vigilant. You know, where am I downloading that from, right? I go out and I try and find certain tools that I use, or somebody points me to a certain new tool I want to check out or something like that. Might take me down a bit of a dark alley, you know, to go get that tool sometimes, and I don't know that website. I err on the other side and I say, I don't know this website, I'm not going to download it here, I'll go try and find it somewhere else. So when it comes to the downloading of any of these EXEs or any of these programs that we want to run, make sure that you're downloading it from a known source. That would be one. I would also add in, you bring up kind of SaaS. There are now, of course, a lot of new websites out there that people can dump a lot of information to. For instance, box.net is one of them I can think of. Some people have not allowed their users to go to these websites because they're serving up, you know, maybe not malware, but they're serving up things that are pirated and stuff like that. So I would be very mindful of the website that I go to download these things from. Hopefully my updates that are coming from Microsoft, when it says you have an update, is coming from Microsoft. I mean, we could get into a great deep philosophical theoretic conversation about certs and everything like that, and whether or not that's really truly coming from there. But yeah, I would be very mindful of those things, especially if I'm downloading it to my computer to run it on my computer for updating it or anything like that. Make sure it's coming from the correct certified place. So do not run as administrator. I'm guessing, and I'm pretty much assuming that most of you out there are running your computer as administrator. There's a couple different reasons for that. First of all, malware will use your logged on credentials, okay? Meaning that if you go out to that website, you go out to a website to download a EXE or something you think that you're going to download and take onto your computer, and when you go and execute that EXE, it never pops up and says, hey, do you need to run as? It just runs the software for you, right? If I go visit a website and I don't know what I've downloaded and it just downloads it in the background for me, it's going to say, what credentials are you using? And it'll try to use those credentials to install onto your computer. If you're running as an administrator, I can install anything then, right? I can use your credentials to do that. The other positive behind not running as administrator is that it also helps from an audit perspective. Okay, for instance, going back and using the change control that the gentleman didn't unfortunately use when he pushed out the changes at RIM, had they had, probably him not running as as a lower end user, he might not have been able to affect that one server that he affected. At the same time, they can do an audit and they can say, well, wow, who made this change? How did this change happen? And they can go, oh, hey, look, Doug did that. In Windows, run as is one of the commands, so you should be able to right click and do a run as an EXE. So you should be able to log in as a regular user, and then you should then, which will have lower rights to that computer, and then do a run as command that would then run that EXE. And it'll of course prompt you for a username and password, and if you do have that information, you could then run it that way. But I would highly recommend, that's one of the things I would not do, is run any of your computers, especially at home. Don't run them as administrator. There is a way, like I pointed out, you can download an EXE to your computer, and then if you need to run it, you can right click it and do a run as. The run as will prompt you for administrator username and password. Okay, and you can also do that pretty much for anything. So for instance, you'll go in as a regular user possibly, and on a command line, let's say you can't do a command like ping or ipconfig, maybe it's been stopped for that user. You can right click the cmd.exe and you can say run as administrator. It'll pop up, and once you log in as administrator into that command or into that command line, you'll be able to run then those commands as administrator. So you still will be able to do those things. One of the strengths of Apple is that they do not allow you to run as a authoritative user. They take away those rights. And if you talk to a Linux or Unix admin, they will highly talk about sudo or su, okay, which means you're changing your credentials from the regular user that you are over to a root or an administrator. There's a couple things I want to make sure that you understand about what antivirus is, other than that application that runs on your computer asking you to update it every so often. It is a blacklist. Does everybody understand when I say a blacklist? Meaning that, for instance, I have a list of malware that cannot run on my computer. I have a list of EXEs or a list of things that cannot happen on my computer. So therefore, if you're not in my whitelist or in my blacklist, you can run on my computer, right? So you have to be in my blacklist for me to stop you from doing anything, right? Signatures goes back to, they're static, right? They're not heuristic wise, right? They're not thinking. They're just going, okay, if this does this, or this comes down into your temp file, or if this EXE tries to come onto your computer, I will stop it. Well, if that malware is changed just a bit, it may come onto your computer because it might not be part of the signature, right? Your AV is only as good as your DAT is. Therefore, if today being, what is it, May 10th? 11th, oops. Then, you know, if you have a DAT from May 1st, your AV is probably not very good. The commandment was run, thou shalt run AV. And yeah, you should run this on all your systems. That means servers. For some strange reason, I get users who think that they don't need to run AV on servers. I'm kind of confused by that one. Virtual systems too. I don't know how many people are using virtual systems at all, or any type of virtual at all yet. But for instance, if you have any type of virtual systems, highly recommend that. For some strange reason, once again, I've got users who think that for some reason virtual systems can't get infected. And there's no exceptions here, okay? Apple and Linux. By the way, the very first piece of malware was an Apple-based malware. Okay, and this Apple has exploded since last year. Does anybody know what fake AV is, by the way? Everybody seen that yet? You know, pops up on your computer, asks you to buy it, tells you you're infected, you click on it, and next thing you know, you're infected. Okay. Apple just a year ago started getting fake AV pop-ups, and they started getting affected by that. Last count I saw, I think we were up to about 750,000 infected machines from the flashback virus. That was last month. Probably higher than that. Once again, there's a patch for that. That could have been patched, and you guys could have, they could have been fine. At the same time, you could have had a DAT file that probably would have stopped that from happening. Linux as well and Unix as well can have AV running on it as well too, by the way. Keep your AV up to date. Gentleman back there pointed that out to us. Extremely important. It's only as good as your DAT is. So if you don't have an up-to-date DAT, and going back to what we talked about earlier, yes, the newer version is there for a reason. It is newer because it has good things in it. Like I said, we have a new engine coming out, and so therefore, if you're running McAfee AV, you probably want to make sure that engine is updated. For us, for McAfee, we push out a DAT at about 11 o'clock Central Time every day. And let me just kind of go into that and just kind of, we talked a little bit about the configuration, and we'll be talking about it a little bit too. Besides going out and if you wanted to kind of get the up-to-date DAT, there is also something within our software that we used to call Artemis, we now call Global Threat Intelligence. And what that is, and I believe it's in a sense baked into our consumer one that sits out there on the tables, you can then, if you're running our enterprise one, you can set that yourself within our little console, our management console. As well as if you want to allow your users to set that, they can also set it too. It's set by default, I think now, it's set to what we consider as very low. I don't consider that a good level. I like it to be at medium. And if you have very paranoid users, like myself, you could set it at very high if you'd like to. What that does is, let's say you download an EXE to your computer, and just like your AV does, your AV looks at the DAT and says, do you know this? You know, it sends a hash to it and says, do you know this? The AV says yes or no, right? So, yeah, I do know that, block that, kill that, delete it, get rid of it, right? Let's say it doesn't. It says, no, I don't know that. Sends it up to what we call Artemis, or to our global threat intelligence out in the cloud, and it says, do you know this? And the global threat intelligence says yes or no. Okay, and does the same thing the DAT file does. The reason why we're doing that is we've got about 100 million endpoints across the globe that are reporting back in. And let's say that hash or fingerprint coming off of that file says, geez, there's been 100 people, now, oh, there's 500 people in the last minute or so who've sent this hash to us, this fingerprint to us. We should look into this. Next thing we know, we find what we call a 0 day, right? Or something brand new, a new variant of something out there, right? The next thing you know, that may get blocked or get deleted, and you'll get a little pop-up and it says, hey, you had a virus, but we cleaned it, we got rid of it for you. We call those, when we do that from our global threat intelligence, it pops up as a generic, so there's really no name for it because it's that fast and that quick. Okay, so that's another way you can kind of turn the volume up on your AV. So there's two different ways we can scan a computer, right, when it comes to antivirus. We can scan it on demand, so I schedule it on maybe a daily basis or something. I'll talk about that in a bit. Or we do an on-axis scan. On-axis means anytime a new file, a new something happens on my computer, maybe a process or something like that, AV will click in and start to scan it or check to see if this is okay to run or happen, right? If I'm downloading a very large file, right, on-axis scan can slow that down because it has to scan that file or wants to scan that file. The way I look at that is, yeah, it's going to slow you down, but I'd rather slow my computer down for that 20 seconds or maybe even minute as opposed to losing my computer for the whole day when they have to go and F-disk it and start over from scratch. Because it's a balance. It's a weighing, that balance. You know who has problems with that, I've learned over the years, are hospitals. For some reason, they go out and they buy, like you said, a third-party software. It's usually a database of some sort. And the next thing you know, if they're not running AV on it, or they're turning off their firewall, like you said, or some sort of protection because that third party said, no, that doesn't work with it. For instance, updates. You'll get people who will tell you, you can't update your Windows 7 systems to Service Pack 1 because our software doesn't run with Service Pack 1. Okay, I just need it in writing, because when there's a fix that might be inside Windows 7 that protects me from something, and I get infected or I get affected, then I want some paper from you explaining to my boss why I just brought down the whole network. Configuring AV. You talked about earlier, should you have two different AVs, one for a server, one for workstation? I would go, like I said, I'm simple-minded. I like to keep things as simple as possible. Have one thing in my network that I know how to deal with. I don't really want to deal with AV on a daily basis. So if I'm getting two different reports from McAfee and from Symantec or wherever telling me that I need to do these different things, I'm just going to get confused. There are specific anti-malware or cleaners that will go out and specifically clean a specific strain or version of malware. Malwarebytes is one of them that I can think of. People will use that a lot, for instance. I can see that being used. I mean, you're running, let's say, McAfee on your endpoint, and then that helps a lot with fake AV, I see. And maybe something happens and it gets through your one, defense. Download that and try and use it. We also do have something called a stinger you can run that's pretty intense as well. It does the same kind of idea. So the other thing, schedule scans. Hey, it's really great that you guys have your AV sitting out there on your computers, but if you're not scheduling scans, it's kind of useless. There's two things, like I said. We've got on-demand scans that you can schedule. You also have on-access scans. I do not suggest disabling any of those things. I like on-access scans. Even if I'm downloading 2 gig file and it has to scan that file, I'm going to let it scan it. I'll go walk away and drink a cup of coffee or go make myself a sandwich or something. What a great excuse for me to get away from my computer. So on-access scan is going to do that as something is coming onto the computer, right? The on-demand scan is something you need to, as an administrator or as a user of or runner of that laptop, desktop, whatever, home user, you need to schedule that. I'd probably recommend, and it usually is a more intense scan, right? And sometimes what happens is maybe you missed it along the on-access, and it's sitting dormant somewhere on your computer, and the on-demand scan will find it because it's now updated the DAT and it'll find that information. I would recommend scanning probably every week if you can, and doing that on kind of an off-hour idea, right? So if you're running servers, for instance, any type of servers, a lot of people will say they're not going to run on-access scans on servers. I don't know if I totally agree with that, but I can understand that. And then you'd probably at least want to do once a week for an on-demand scan. Just installing AV, even updating the DAT, ain't going to do much if we're not scanning and we're not making sure that it's working. Exclusions. I get a lot of people coming, well, SQL needs to be excluded. You can, by the way, you can do a Google of exclusions Microsoft, and you will probably find a white paper on what exclusions Microsoft suggests. I'd be very careful with that paper, okay? And most of them are usually a little higher, and it's a server-based idea, right? The idea behind it is, hey, I'm running a database and it needs to be running at a certain speed or something like that, and when transactions are happening, the AV is slowing it down. There are ways to configure your AV that doesn't happen, right? Certain processes, we talked about, hey, I know that Flight Simulator does this, therefore I'm going to allow those things to run at a different level relative to my AV. So once again, you know, your level of what you want to do. Like I said, think long and hard about it. Google it if you want to exclude it, so you make sure you're doing the correct exclusions. I just wanted to throw this slide in because you do need to run AV, but my next thing is going to be talking about that you need more than AV. What the percentage of protection is for AV is probably not 100%, but you can see our issue here. I get 40,000 to 60,000 per day, okay? So for instance, somebody comes to me and says, you know what? You didn't catch a certain strain of the XYZ virus, but you know what? I downloaded, you know, some small AV company from somewhere, and they found it. You know why? Because I have 100 million endpoints out there, and this guy has 100. And so he can push out a DAT that may find that strain, because whether it's a false positive or not, I have to go through QA here at McAfee or Symantec or some of the bigger ones, Microsoft as well, before I can push out a DAT and make sure it doesn't crash those 100 million endpoints. So that brings me to this point, which is AV is not enough. And you brought the question about firewalls. In our realm, McAfee realm, we call it HIPS, by the way, host intrusion prevention. That includes a firewall as well. I'll use Microsoft as an example. I believe Microsoft, especially Windows 7, has the capability, of course, of having the Defender or the AV on there, as well as you can also, I think it defaults to turning on. I'm pretty certain Windows 7 and Server 2008 default with a firewall, which is, once again, if I'm defaulting these things, I would make sure I understand those configurations. And that might be one of the things that we're running into when that person calls me up and says, hey, you have to disable your firewall, because they don't want to get into the point of the minutia of saying, really what you need to do is put an exclusion in your firewall that says allow this IP address into here, right? They're just saying, I don't want to get into that. Just disable that stuff. HIPS firewalls, probably be careful about some of that on servers, because what we're doing on servers is we're serving up certain applications, and if we don't understand how we've configured that firewall on that server, the possibility is to possibly stop people from accessing that application. So on servers, I'd be very careful about some of that. Let's use a home user, for instance. Not all home users, they're going to have a router, of course, to their DSL, but specifically speaking, they should have a firewall on their host itself, the asset itself. Now, talking about denial of service attacks on my perimeter, if I'm a corporation, let's say I'm CNA, and I need to defend against that, yes, I will have a perimeter security sitting out there, and part of that perimeter security would be a firewall, an appliance that would sit out there. And it would possibly be in line to defend my web applications that may be attacked by denial of service. I can watch after, kind of like a weatherman, and say, hey, I'm starting to see certain types of activity on my firewall, on my perimeter, and I think we're about to get a DOS, a denial of service attack, right? However, if a denial of service attack really wants to attack me and go after me, it's going to be very difficult for me to defend. What it is, it's literally just sending, I mean, trying to use an example, I just recently, I think there was I was reading about a holiday over in China where they all, I think it was the Chinese New Year, where they, the government of China set up these new web servers for everybody to go get new tickets so they could go home, because it's a huge, huge holiday and all these people want to travel. What is it, a third of the world's population are wanting to travel at one time, right? So they set up these servers, and the next thing they knew they literally had a denial of service attack from all their users trying to get tickets. It wasn't malicious, it just happened. So what denial of service is, it's just an overloading of that system, right? Right. I put whitelisting up there. There's new types of software that's happening. We have some software as well that, as opposed to doing a blacklist, you can do a whitelist. So you could say, I'm going to allow this stuff to run on my computer, meaning that anything outside that list isn't going to be allowed to run on my computer. Think beyond malware. Like I said, you saw the 40,000 to 60,000 a day. Malware is saturated. It's getting beat up. We need to think beyond this stuff and figure out a different way. This goes towards everybody, home users specifically. I get a lot of kind of invites in my personal email. Like I told you, I'm on LinkedIn, so I'll get an email every so often that says, hey, so-and-so wants to be your friend on LinkedIn or something like that. I never click on that link inside there. I always go to my LinkedIn account, I find the invitation, it's usually in my account, and then I click on the link there. Right. I never click on the link inside there. Do not go down dark alleys. I think this goes back to kind of the very first one, the be vigilant. If the website doesn't look right, if you're going to click on something and it has .ru after it, or some sort of .something after it, .tv, whatever, and it's not .com or .org or something like that, don't go there. Seriously, it's amazing. People will tell you after they've infected their own system, they will say, I knew I shouldn't have done that. Yeah. It's funny. I think if you're always suspicious of something, if I get an email and it has a strange title in it, or if there's a link in it, when I open it up, I sometimes just delete it. If it's from someone I know, I'll delete it. My feeling is, it's like if I don't answer the phone, if and it's somebody, if it's really that important, they'll call back. Well, if it's really that important, they'll send me the email again, or they'll call me up and say, hey, did you get that email? I mean, how many times I've gotten that, hey, did you read that email I sent you? No, I deleted it. Oh, okay, I'll resend it to you. Okay, cool. That way I know, that way I know it's coming from the person, but I do. So some myths, and we could probably add on more to this, but I wanted to just kind of add these things in here for you guys. Macs, if you haven't understood that yet, Macs are really not the safest. I really dislike when I hear that from an Apple user. And I'm not a hater of Macs, but please, if you own a Mac, put something on it that will protect you. And the same thing, I'll hear that a lot from Unix and Linux admins and sysadmins are don't touch my servers. Well, they get malware too, unfortunately. And like I said, all I need is AV. Not true. Please, it's not just downloading and installing AV. There's like hopefully we've talked about it enough today that there's a lot more to be done about that. Okay, if I'm a hacker, if I'm a person who wants to put a Trojan on your computer and get information off your computer, get you to go to my website or something like that, why would I want to slow your computer down? Why would I want you to know that I'm in your house? If I'm eavesdropping on you, I'm not going to go, hey, yep. Can you speak a little louder? I didn't hear that. So if your computer is slowing down, redo it. It's nothing to do with you. Don't turn off the AV. That ain't it. Or it's not the malware that's sitting on it. Don't go out and download more AV and do it. I mean, don't get me wrong. Run an on-demand scan if you want. Go for it. That's great. But it's not because there's some that's that's old school. They don't do that anymore, okay? They don't want to announce themselves anymore. Use more than one AV. A good point about going through the different security lines. That's a great way to put it. And then virtual systems, I just wanted to add that one in there. You do, for some reason, people these days think virtual systems don't need it, they need it as well. Maybe in some of your infrastructure you might not have all these things, but workstation servers you probably do. Once again, I would not treat them differently in the sense of I wouldn't put different AV on them. However, they're going to be possibly on a server. You may want to research and find out, if it's an SQL server or an Exchange server, should I be excluding? Would it, is it slowing things down? If it's not, once again, if it's not slowing people down or things are working correctly, then I'd probably leave it as default. But I'd probably research some of that before I start just sticking some of my security things onto a server, especially since I'm serving up more than just one person. Mobile devices, Android does have AV capabilities. We do have AV software, McAfee does, and other people have it as well. I'd be very careful though, don't go out to the App Store and just download any AV. That is a scary place. Right. And you will download something that you might not need on your computer. Embedded devices are things like kiosks you might see. ATM is an embedded device. Any type of single function system is an embedded device. I don't know if you guys probably have those, probably don't, but these usually have lesser resources and therefore we need to run things at a lower, or run a different type of software on that. Because we've kind of talked about this, it seems like throughout here, and hopefully you get that idea. It is truly a balancing act. Even at your own home, like I said, my family wants to get on Facebook. I'm going to allow that. How do I protect my systems though, or protect it so it doesn't get fake AV? Specifically, when we're talking about a business or an organization, what do they need to do their business? Do they need that real player to do their business? I don't want to get in, security does not want to get or be the bane of anybody's existence. I do not want to slow anybody down from doing their job. At the same time, if you get infected or your computer gets hosed because of some sort of malware or something you did, guess what? I need to redo your computer. How long are you going to be without your computer then? So it has to be that fine-tuning balancing act to make sure that we're serving the people that we're needing to serve. At the same time, they're not infecting or they're not destroying our network, right? So we really are managing risk here. Okay, we're really not security IT people. We're really saying, okay, what is the risk? Goes back to our exceptions we talked about. How do we tune the AV? What other securities do we need? Do we need a firewall out at our perimeter? Do we not need a firewall at our perimeter? I could go on about all kinds of other security devices that we could talk about, and they may be overkill for some organizations. Other organizations need that type of security. So when you look at this, look at that risk, measure that risk, get an idea. What does the business need to do, and how much security do I need to put on that for that? So thank you very much. If we're done, I appreciate your time. Thanks for inviting me.